This is the Sales Gravy Podcast. Hi, I'm Jeb Blunt, best-selling author of Fanatical Prospecting, Objections, Sales EQ, and Inked, and I'm here to help you open more doors, close bigger deals, and rock your commission check.
It's Jeb Blunt Jr., and thanks for listening to Money Monday. We took a short summer break, and following that break, we're going to catch up on some recordings for Money Monday. In the meantime, we're going to introduce a new podcast style for you to enjoy. Those new Money Monday episodes will be up very, very soon, so keep an eye on the feed. And remember, Sales Gravy Live is happening in September and November. Our team will be in Atlanta with a Fanatical Prospecting Bootcamp, which is a 2-day intensive for those that want to take their sales game to the next level. Very few tickets remain for that September date, so go to salesgravy.com/live. That's salesgravy.com/live for more details. In this week's episode, please enjoy 30 minutes or less, the high cost of fast pizza. A story about how a single guarantee propelled Domino's to success, but nearly destroyed the company in the process. If you're a sales leader, or anyone who's ever set big goals for a team, what you are about to hear matters more than you think. Because as most good ideas do, it started with $900 and a half-baked plan. It was 1960, and America was changing fast. Suburbs were expanding, families were getting busier, and convenience was starting to become a kind of religion. And amid all of that, their two brothers, Tom and James Monaghan, they spotted an opportunity. They scraped together some cash and bought a pizzeria called DomiNick's in Michigan. Two brothers, one store, and really big dreams. At first, they planned to split the work. But within a couple of months, James had decided that he liked driving Volkswagens more than he liked making pizzas, and he traded his half of the business to Tom for a beat-up Beetle. And then Tom Monaghan was alone and free to dream even bigger. Because by 1965, he'd expanded to 3 stores. Enough to cause a problem. He couldn't actually legally keep the DomiNick's name, and an employee, probably between deliveries, suggested a brand new name. You know that name as Domino's. And it stuck. The logo was 3 dots, one for each store. Tom figured he'd add a new dot for every new location, but after opening store number 5, he wisely reconsidered his plan. Because Domino's didn't just grow, it exploded. By 1967, the first franchise opened, and by 1978, there were over 200 Domino's stores. Tom Monaghan wasn't just building a pizza company, he was engineering a delivery empire. And Tom wasn't just obsessed with pizza, he was obsessed with time. Every decision Domino's made, from the way they designed their stores to the way they trained their drivers, was aimed at shaving seconds off of every single delivery time. Single-size pizza doughs for consistency, a menu stripped down to the bare essentials, and delivery routes mapped out like military campaigns. Because Domino's wasn't just selling food, it was selling urgency. And then, in the 1980s, came a promise that would define Domino's and its entire legacy. Pizza, delivered in 30 minutes, or it's free. It was bold, it was brilliant, and it was just a little bit crazy. This is the story of how a single guarantee propelled Domino's to dominate the pizza world, and how it almost destroyed the company in the process. The wrong incentives, pushed too far, don't just change behavior, they change everything. Picture America in the 1980s. Microwave ovens were revolutionizing kitchens. The Federal Express, today known as FedEx, was turning overnight delivery into a cultural expectation, and Americans weren't just eating faster, they were living faster. Domino's fit perfectly into this new rhythm. In 1978, Domino's was still a scrappy underdog, with just 200 stores tucked away in college towns and sleepy suburbs, but Tom Monaghan had a bigger dream, and he made a decision that changed everything. A promise so simple that it bordered on completely dangerous. If we don't deliver your pizza in 30 minutes or less, it's free. It wasn't just about pizza, it was about certainty. If you order a pizza, you knew that in 30 minutes you'd have something hot and ready on your dinner table. Or, if it wasn't there, your dinner and your night was free. And America bought it. Within a year, sales exploded. Domino's wasn't just making pizza, they were manufacturing momentum. Every store was a speed factory, slimmed down menus, cookie-cutter layouts, ovens built for blitzing orders, and drivers who might as well have been sitting behind the wheel with the engine already running. From 200 stores to over 2,500 by 1985, and over 5,000 stores by 1989. 5,000 stores. Competitors scrambled. Pizza Hut Little Caesars, they just couldn't keep up. Domino's owned the delivery lane. Every commercial hammered the same message: fast, cheap, and reliable. But something else was happening too. Domino's wasn't just feeding people faster, it was feeding a growing American impatience. There was an expectation that whatever you wanted, food, service, success, should arrive not just fast, but immediately. And here's the thing about moving faster: you don't always see the cracks forming beneath your feet. At first, the cracks were small. Hairline fractures beneath a glossy surface, a delivery driver rolling a stop sign here, a speeding ticket there, a pizza arriving a little too cold or a little too late. But this wasn't a system built to reward patience. It was a system built to reward speed. And inside Domino's stores, the pressure wasn't subtle. Drivers were unofficially expected to race the clock. If they missed the 30-minute mark, some franchises made them pay for the order out of their own pockets. Others docked bonuses, and the message was clear: make it fast or make it up yourself. Rolling stops became running red lights. Neighborhood shortcuts turned into risky maneuvers through heavy traffic. And yet, for a time, the system kept humming. What customers didn't see, and what Domino's leadership didn't want to see, was that risk was compounding in the background. Speed wasn't just a business model anymore. It had become a way of life. But speed comes with consequences. By the late 1980s, insurance companies started raising Domino's premiums by 15 to 20%, and reports surfaced of accidents tied to delivery drivers rushing to meet that 30-minute window. At first, Domino's executives dismissed these incidents as the cost of doing business, an unfortunate side effect of their winning formula. But then came the media. Local news outlets started connecting the dots: Domino's delivery accidents, rushed drivers, and tragic outcomes. One story out of St. Louis caught the nation's attention. A Domino's driver ran a red light, colliding with another vehicle, and inside of that other car was someone named Jean Kinder, a woman whose life was permanently changed. In the courtroom, the story wasn't just about one accident. It was about the corporate culture that seemed to value speed over safety. And the jury agreed. They awarded Kinder $78 million in punitive damages. And that was loud enough to echo all the way down to Domino's corporate headquarters in Michigan. And suddenly, the cracks, they weren't just visible, they were undeniable. Because in 1993, Domino's officially ended the 30-minute guarantee in the United States. Publicly, they cited concerns for driver and customer safety, but privately, they knew the truth. The incentive that once fueled their rise had become too risky to survive. And here's the thing about incentives: they just don't shape what people do, they shape who people become. And Domino's wasn't the only company that had to learn this lesson the hard way. Let's take Wells Fargo, for instance. They were once hailed as one of the most stable banks in America, and in the mid-2010s, it began pushing an aggressive cross-selling strategy. Supervisors told bankers to open more accounts, sell more products, and hit quota, or else. Employees did exactly what they were told. They opened fake accounts, forged signatures, and enrolled customers in services they didn't want or even need. But Wells Fargo didn't create fraudsters. They created an incentive system that made fraud feel like survival. And they paid a heavy price: $9 billion in fines as of 2025, with multiple CEO resignations and their reputation that's still in tatters. And then there's Uber, whose early days were fueled by what they called quests. These were incentive programs that rewarded drivers for hitting trip targets within tight time windows. It sounds motivating, right? Until you realize that it pushed drivers to skip breaks, ignore traffic laws, and stay on the road much longer than was safe. And some cities pushed back. Regulators stepped in. Riders began to notice the cost of a company that rewarded hustle with blinders on. Or let's take a look at Amazon warehouses, for example. For years, Amazon tracked workers with minute-by-minute productivity metrics, scan times, and time-off task rates. And they rewarded those who performed at robotic levels. But it became a cost. Workers skipping bathroom breaks, there were reports of injuries, and there was turnover rates so high that they had to rebuild entire teams every few months. When incentives become mechanical, people do too. And there's a name for this. It's called the Cobra effect, named after a well-meaning British policy in colonial India. Officials offered a bounty for every dead cobra. The idea was to reduce the cobra population. But instead, people started breeding cobras. When the program ended, they released them, and the problem was even worse than when it started. The lesson? When a metric becomes a target, it ceases to become a good metric. That's Goodhart's law. It applies everywhere, in sales, in leadership, operations, and marketing. If you create the wrong goal, you will still get results, just not the ones you want. Domino's had learned what happens when powerful incentive plans run unchecked. But unlike many companies, they didn't bury the story. They didn't just tweak the marketing. They changed course entirely. In the late 2000s, Domino's made a stunning move. They publicly admitted what customers had been whispering for years. They said, "Our pizza just isn't very good." That line came from a national campaign that was launched in 2010. They showed real customer complaints. They didn't sugarcoat the reviews, and they took the hits, and then they got to work. A new recipe, a new crust, new sauce. They completely overhauled product, marketed with transparency and with humility. And it worked. Because Domino's stock, which had hovered around $8 in 2008, climbed to over $300 within the decade. But they didn't stop at the product. Domino's rebranded itself as a tech company that just happened to make pizza. They rolled out GPS driver tracking, voice ordering via smart assistants, and they even tested delivery by robot and drone. They flipped the script. Less about speed at all costs and more about control, transparency, and user experience. It's not that Domino's abandoned incentives altogether. It's just that they learned how to build better ones, incentives that reward the right behaviors, incentives that can evolve. In sales, leadership, and business, this is the real takeaway. It's not that incentives are dangerous, but that they are powerful. What we measure shapes how people act, and that's true for delivery drivers, it's true for bankers, it's true for you, and it's true for me. When speed becomes the only target, we start to cut corners. When volume becomes the only metric, we lose sight of trust. When incentives go unchecked, they become a silent operating system rewriting how people behave without ever announcing the upgrade. So ask yourself, are your incentives pushing people toward excellence or just toward activity? Are they driving sustainable growth or just temporary wins? Are they aligned with the mission or quietly undermining it? Because whether you're running a sales team or delivering pizzas, the principle is the same. If you want better results, build better incentives. And if you don't want to build a legacy, do what Domino's did. Don't just move fast, learn when to hit the brakes. And when you're tired, ready to go home, and the day is over, remember, make one more call. Hey, it's Jeb Blunt Jr. here. I know you just listened to me, and if you made it to the end, thank you. My team and I spent several weeks writing and producing this. It's a limb that we're walking out on, and I hope that you enjoyed the story. If you have feedback or want to share your support, please send us a DM on LinkedIn, letting us know what your honest feedback is. And don't forget to subscribe, follow, like, and review our podcast on your listening platform. It helps a ton. And remember, Sales Gravy Live is happening in September and November. Our team will be in Atlanta with a Fanatical Prospecting Bootcamp, which is a 2-day intensive for those that want to take their sales game to the next level. Very few tickets remain for that September date, so go to salesgravy.com/live. That's salesgravy.com/live for more details. And we'll catch you next time on the Sales Gravy Podcast.